Welcome to the Legacy Podcast, making our Sustainable Development Goals (SDGs) more famous for action. I am your host, United Nations Mama, and I'm so glad you are here. Today's legacy will be to talk about the 13th Sustainable Development Goal, the Climate Action Goal, for you to grab your knowledge, discover your role, and do your action. We are living in the era of the great realignment. Every decision we make now, from how we build our cities to what we put on our plates, is a vote for the temperature of the world our children will inherit. Think of climate action not as a political debate or a complex scientific paper, but as a global thermostat and blanket of your home. Imagine you live in a beautiful, balanced house. To keep you comfortable, the house has a natural blanket in the atmosphere made of gases. This blanket is perfect. It traps just enough of the sun's heat to keep you warm, but lets enough out so you don't overheat. For the past 150 years, we have been thickening that blanket. Every time you burn coal, oil, or gas, you are adding extra layers of insulation to the roof. Now the house is getting too hot. The air conditioning, that is our glaciers and ice caves, are melting, and the ventilation system, that is our winds and ocean currents, is starting to glitch, causing wide storms in the kitchen and heat waves in the bedroom. Sustainable Development Goal 13, Climate Action, is our plan or a plan to adjust the thermostat. It is the common sense of realizing that we need to stop adding layers. In one word, mitigation. We have to switch from dirty fuels to clean energy like the sun and wind. And also we need to stop the smoke from thickening the blanket any further. It's also a common sense of realizing that we need to weatherproof our house or the house. In one word, adaptation. The house is already getting warmer than it used to be, so we need stronger roofs and plant shades like the forest, and also make sure our plumbing, that is our water systems, can handle the new extremes. We also need to know that the fire alarm is already beating. In one word, urgency. We can't wait until the house is on fire to buy an extinguisher. So climate action is about moving from talking about the heat to fixing our cooling system today. In 2026, we are still staring at some critical gaps that determine whether we save the house or let it burn. We are looking at global gaps like the ambition gap. For example, scientists tell us we must keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius to avoid a total system failure. Currently, our promises don't match our actions. We are on a path to a much hotter world, and we need to close this gap between what we say we will do and what we are actually building or what we actually build. We're also facing the investment gap. It takes money to switch a whole community or nation to clean energy. Right now, there is a massive gap between the trillions of dollars sitting in the bank, while some green projects around the globe need that money. So we need to move our wealth to where our sun and our wind are, to provide clean and affordable energy for us. We are also facing the resilience gap. This is about vulnerability. The people who did the least to taking the blankets from the sample story or illustration you heard at the beginning of this legacy, in this sense, are the poorest nations. They are the ones feeling the heat most. There is a very big gap in fairness. So we need to ensure that as we fix the thermostat, we don't leave the most vulnerable rooms of the house to flood. That is, we don't leave the most vulnerable people, communities, and nations like the least developing nations or developed nations and all the underdeveloped or even some of our developing nations behind. So how can we close this gap? We can close this gap by moving from just talking to transition. So instead of offsetting our carbon, we can start eliminating it by changing how we move and how we build. Instead of fighting nature, we can use nature-based solutions like planting mangroves to stop our floods. Instead of seeing climate as a burden, we should start to see it as the greatest innovation opportunity in our human world history. So you have to think of climate action as a global maintenance project for the only life support system we have. We have moved past the era of warning into the era of consequence and adaptation. With global temperatures hitting high records in recent years, the goal is a survival strategy for the 21st century. Climate action, letting you know that it's both a technological and a social upgrade, is moving our production from noisy, polluting internal combustion to silent, efficient electrification, is moving from vulnerable centralized power grids to resilient decentralized microgrids, is moving from a predatory relationship with nature to partnership with it. So your action paralysis towards our climate action goal can occur because you are told the world is ending. So you can solve this by realizing that the world is actually changing. And we are the ones who decide or who can decide what it changes into. Localizing our Sustainable Development Goal 13 means moving from climate grief or just grieving about climate and its everything that comes with it to climate strategy, thinking of what to do to actually help our climate. It is also about making your household, your business, and your community climate proof, understanding that in a warming world, resilience is your only true currency. Whether you are planting a mangrove forest or auditing a corporate supply chain, you are participating in the most important project in our human history. That is the stabilization of our home. You cannot say we are good at responsible consumption and production of quality education or this or that when our climate is telling us otherwise, and it's even about to eat us all up, whether in too much heat, too much cold, or consistent floodings and all of that. So this should be our decade of implementation. Climate change is no longer a distant story or a distant problem. It is also, if you come closer and look at it, it is also a housing problem, a health problem, and a supply chain problem. Your awareness action gap towards our Sustainable Development Goal 13, climate action, closes when you realize that the climate does not care about your intentions or our intentions. It only responds to our physics. We cannot negotiate with a melting glacier, and we cannot greenwash a hurricane. The United Nations Mama is making you believe on the Legacy podcast, this legacy climate action, that climate action is one of the greatest opportunities in our human history. It is a chance to rebuild our world so that it is both cleaner, fairer, and more resilient than ever. We are not just saving the planet. The planet may be fine without us on its own. We are saving ourselves. So grab your knowledge, discover your role, and do your action. To bridge your awareness action gap, you must understand the specific United Nations targets that govern the global response to the climate crisis, or what the United Nations mean, or what they are aiming to achieve when these goals were created. I mean, not just they, but telling both you and I and government houses around the world, private enterprises, organizations, and startups that this is what is possible for the climate action goal. Target 13.1 is strengthening resilient and adaptive capacity. That is strengthening the ability of all countries to withstand climate-related hazards and natural disasters. This includes early warning systems that can save lives before a storm hits. That is, a country being strengthened to understand when a hazardous or a natural disaster is coming, climate-related ones. So how can we understand that? Is by building technologies, building systems that can detect these disasters even before they hit any part of the world. Target 13.2 is integration of climate measures into policy, mandating that every national government builds climate change into both their economic planning, strategies, and their national budgets. Target 13.3 is building knowledge and capacity to meet climate change. That is, improving the quality of our education, awareness raising, and human institutional capacity for both mitigation and adaptation. This is about making the carbon literacy or the knowledge about climate action or changes a universal knowledge. It's not something that is available at a very expensive rate. It's what someone anywhere will hear about and can afford to hear anytime, so that they can know what is happening and how to position their planning, their startups, ideas, and innovations towards that, towards solving whatever they see is a problem. In simple terms, it's making the education of our climate and also its mitigation and adaptation strategies and all of that available, and also the skills and capacity building. What we mean by capacity building, that is training people to actually build what can the technology or the system that can improve our climate. Target 13.A is implementing the United Nations Framework Convention. These targets are more about how they are called implementation targets, whereby the United Nations is saying this is how we want to achieve the whole targets, mobilizing the $100 billion annual goal to support developing nations in their transition to green energy and resilient infrastructure. Target 13.B is about promoting mechanisms for raising capacities in least developing countries or nations, focusing specifically on women, youth, and local or marginalized communities in the LDCs, that is the least developed countries, and also small island developing states, the SIDS, to ensure they have the tools to manage climate planning. Moving on ahead to the case studies for the Climate Action Sustainable Development Goal. We have two case studies for this legacy. Case study 1 is called the Sponge City Revolution. This happened in Zhengzhou, China. The problem: like many rapidly urbanizing areas, Zhengzhou suffered from urban drowning. Concrete prevented rainwater from soaking into the ground, leading to catastrophic floods that cost lives and billions in infrastructure. What was the solution? So the city implemented what is called the Sponge City concept, a massive climate adaptation project. How did they do it? By replacing concrete with porous bricks and rain gardens that absorb water. They also built urban parks that acted as natural reservoirs during heavy rains. What was the result? There was flood mitigation, that is, the city was now able to absorb 70% of rainwater, significantly reducing the risks of flash flood. There was also the added greenery lowered the urban heat island effect by several degrees. That is, there was a great cooling effect that was brought into the city. What is the lesson for you? We cannot fight the weather, we must design with it. Climate action is about turning vulnerabilities into green infrastructure. I hope you understand that, or you understood this. Case study 2 is what is called the solar mamas. This happened in rural areas of India to South Africa, the global south. So many rural communities in the global south relied on kerosene for light, and kerosene is expensive, dangerous, and emits high levels of CO2 and black carbon. These communities are the most vulnerable to climate change, but they have the least access to clean energy and its mitigation tools. So what was the solution? The Barefoot College started to train middle-aged women from rural, non-electrified villages, often grandmothers who may be illiterate, to become solar engineers. There was technical training, that is, they learned to build, install, and repair solar lighting systems using color-coded manuals and hands-on practice. Just imagine. There was also community sovereignty, that is, once trained, they returned to their own villages to electrify their communities, charging only a small fee for maintenance that stays within the village economy. What was the result? There was carbon mitigation. Thousands of liters of kerosene were replaced by clean solar energy every year, and women became climate leaders of their communities, proving that technical capacity is not tied to only formal schooling. You must not go to a big university or college to have technical knowledge. You can be taught it. Like, you can be informally educated on it. So what is the lesson for you? Climate action is most effective when it empowers those at the front lines. By decentralizing energy, we are increasing global resilience. So you have to take note of that. Going on ahead to your actions, these are both professional, household, simple, and even complex actions you could start to take from today onwards towards our climate action goal. You can check or calculate your footprint, see where your biggest leaks are, whether in your travel, in your food, or in your home. Then again, shift your AC or heating just by 2 degrees Celsius. This can reduce your home emissions by up to 10%. Use a power strip to completely cut off electronics when not in use. Standby power accounts for 1% of global emissions. Challenge yourself to take zero short-haul flights. Use the train. This can end up saving carbon by over 80%. Swap your beef for lentils once a week. If everyone did this, it would be like taking millions of cars off the road. That is eating lower on the food or on our food chain. This is not for everyone, but if you can do it. You can wash your clothes, wash clothes. It saves energy and makes your clothes even last longer. Look at your bank. If they are funding fossil fuel expansion or more production of it, move your money to a bank that is supporting clean, affordable energy, and so on. Replace or even organizations, maybe your investment is in organizations that are producing these fossil fuels. If you can, move your investments to a more greener, cleaner industry. Replace every remaining bulb in your house with high efficiency LEDs today. Also, ask your employer, or you can ask your employer to provide carbon literacy training for all staffs. That is, your staffs in your organization, your company, your non-profit, your programs or initiatives or whatever should be able to have a little knowledge or literacy about climate action, changes, mitigations, and adaptations, irrespective of our fields and so on. You can decide to fund a tree planting project in low-income neighborhoods to help them adapt to heat waves. Also, you can decide to start hosting a climate conference, talk show, or talk room, creating a safe space for everyone to discuss climate anxiety and our local or innovative solutions to it. Lobby your local school board to install solar panels and use them as the living lab for students. Advocate for solars in schools, solars in organizations, in companies, especially in public ones or open public spaces and so on. You know that thousands of citizens are coming here every day to get one or two things done. We cannot afford being shut out or frustrated because of a light issue or anything related that would have been solved by one or two climate actions. You can also donate to non-profits or NGOs or to programs or initiatives that provide weather alert tech to farmers in developing nations. That is supporting early warning signs, giving early warning signs to farmers who never hear of it, who never knows of it, just like that. Maybe because they don't have the technology or the literacy to even know or to even check stuff like this. So if there are NGOs or initiatives informing farmers about these climate problems, the incoming ones or the upcoming ones, and the ones that could affect their livelihoods, or even people in the least developing or developed nations, please move your funds there to support them. You can also decide to use your social media to share one solution, not just a problem, every week. Share one solution to a climate problem every week or month, however you want to share it. Decide to not just be the one who announces the problem without a solution. Replace your lawn with native drought-resistant plants to save water during droughts. You can also volunteer for disaster relief, lobby for municipal bike lanes, and support local community solar projects. All these are so much important. They may sound so simple or so to you, and you are wondering, how does this even affect our climate in any way? But these are actually actions you could take to be part of the movement that directly or indirectly decides how our climate acts and reacts to us back. If you run a business, start an internal carbon tax, that is, charge your departments for their emissions and use the fund for green upgrades. You can also support international campaigns that demand wealthy nations pay for climate damages in the global south and so on. You can also fund groups that use traditional controlled burns to prevent catastrophic wildfires, that is, support indigenous fire management. Everyone cannot, or a company or whoever cannot just decide to burn anything they want at any time and anywhere they want. So if there are movements controlling these wildfires or preventing them, then, or organizations self, then you should support them once, or if you know about them, and if you can, support laws that also pay farmers to trap carbon in their soil, that is, advocating for regenerative agriculture. You can also decide to support NGOs working on climate security and preventing conflicts over our water and land. You can donate to programs that put climate science in the curriculum of every school globally, that is, universal climate education, making sure that everyone knows about it and everyone is doing something about it. You can vote exclusively for candidates who have a science-based, transparent climate plan. Realize that climate action is not a hobby. It should not be a hobby. It is a duty to the unborn. So let's not relax on it. Support individuals who have a clear vision for climate actions in their nation or communities. You can also focus on mentoring young climate leaders, young climate youths who are so passionate about climate action. If you're already at that level where you can mentor someone, where you can teach someone, where you can show someone the way, please do that. And if you are at the level where you can set up an organization, NGO, that funds education for these young climate leaders, or funds conferences or gatherings that educate these young youths into more of doing more of climate action, then it's very important we all do so, because in doing this we are all acting as one member, one crew, trying to get to a destination. You can decide to use plant a Miyawaki tiny forest. That is, use this high density planning method in your backyard or school. It grows 10 times faster and absorbs 30 times more CO2. Also, for your next holiday, spend your travel time as part of the experience in a tray or a boat rather than a hurry up and wait flight. Move your pensions or private investment into impact funds that specifically target methane reduction technology. If you know this, you know it, and rest assured you can do it. You can also decide to support regional political advocacy on climate actions, mitigations, and adaptations. You can also decide to support platforms that send funds to climate impacted families in the global south, or in any community that is affected by one, or always affected by one. Demand that your local government publishes free high-resolution flood and heat risk maps for all citizens. So these maps or these data should not be something that is just available when the disaster is about to hit. Let it be universally or nationally available, so that even citizens can take them to the smaller communities where government seems they can't see, or they can't reach, or act like they can't reach, and so on. You can also decide to start spending some of your time in advising a young person to start a green technology business, a clean and affordable energy business, and so on, a sustainable or regenerative agricultural practicing business and advocacy. So our young should be directed in this area, because this is the future, the only future that may end up saving us, not just our planet, us. We are saving ourselves. Because if we are not doing anything in the planet may remain as it is. It's us that we are saving. We can also decide to, or you can also decide to study how your local ancestors manage water and heat right before the electricity, right before technology, and so on, and adopt these methods today. You can also make normalize climate conversations. Let it not be conversations we just hear in conferences or conference room or political briefs and so on. We should normalize it, talking about it. So, what are you doing for the climate? You can ask your neighbor or so on. Also, it should become a standard, a non-judgmental question in your social circle. You can start to make it happen. You can also decide to purchase small amounts of carbon removal credits from startups using enhanced rock weathering. If you get the meaning of that. Okay. Never vote for a candidate who does not have a transparent, science-aligned climate plan. Your vote is your most powerful carbon credit you own. I will say this again. Never vote a candidate who does not have a transparent climate plan for your nation, for your community. Your vote is one of the most carbon credits you own. So let's normalize voting for leaders or politicians or community leaders who are climate literate, who is thinking about the future of our the weather of the country or the future of our weather and so on. Because we cannot be saying that we are developing or we are advancing in every area of the economy, then our heat is killing us or our cold is holding us tightly. So and so on, and some other disasters that neglect of climate action could cause. Your awareness action gap towards our Sustainable Development Goal 13 closes when you realize that the atmosphere does not care about your feelings. We cannot or you cannot feel your way out of a 2-degree world. You can or we can only build our way out of it. We have to believe that climate action is the ultimate or one of the ultimate acts of love for our unborn children or generation. It is a silent promise that we will live a world that still breathes, still grows, and still thrives. So we are not just stopping a disaster, we are starting a civilization that finally knows how to live within the limits of this home. You have now grabbed your knowledge, discovered your role. Now do your action, because the most important thing we will ever build is the climate of the next century. Stay connected to the Legacy Podcast TLP to lead you through on how you can continue to create a sustainable change. When you choose to listen, act, and share this legacy, you are the engine that is making our Sustainable Development Goal climate action more famous for action.